Certainly think this number is much higher, have been detained in a network of over 1,500 camps, the largest since Nazi Germany. Several countries around the world, including Netherlands, Canada, and the United States, have termed what is happening to the Uyghurs as genocide. But the unique nature of the oppression against Uyghur women by the government of China is not only due to their ethnicity and their region, but it is amplified by their gendered vulnerability as women. And it is imperative that we look at this as a women's rights issue. The world, we saw a surge of focus on sexual violence and sexual abuse with the Me Too movement. But where is the Me Too movement for Uyghur women? And that is the question we really need to ask ourselves today. Experience of enslavement that you will learn about. You'll learn about torture, gender-based violence, a system of organized rape, not only just in the camps, but in their homes, where the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has instilled twin relative program where one person is paired, maybe a 10-year-old girl would be paired with a 40-year-old man, and they have to live in the same house and in the same home and be treating each other like relatives. These are some of the stories that I personally have heard testimony from camp survivors that I have interviewed for our report for our television show, Justice for All Now. You will hear about sexual slavery, forced marriage, mothers separated from children as young as nursing babies. Several of the camp survivors have told us about witnessing mothers with leaking breast milk because they have been separated from their little babies. Sterilization, as well as forced labor. I'm going to be speaking to you just with a little bit of background about sexual violence, rape as a tool of genocide. Justice for All's work on this is over 25 years old. It started under the Bosnia genocide. We worked with the National Organization of Women to get rape declared as a war crime, a tool of war. And this, let's go back to that essence of how rape is used. Rape is the most violent, humiliating, and brutal offense inflicted on a woman and her community. Sexual violence and rape are powerful weapons that have been used by government agencies and other social movements to perpetuate genocide. Rape also serves as a tool to demoralize and dehumanize and to punish enemies of the state. And to this Chinese Communist Party, Uyghurs are enemies of the state. Rape often sexually violates women and girls with the specific intention of damaging their reproductive system. And this is very important to note that, because that is a stage, that is a stage of genocide. Scholars call this ethnic rape as an official policy of war in a genocidal campaign for political control. In 1993, the United Nations Human Rights Commission passed a resolution allowing for crimes of rape and sexual violence to be prosecuted as war crimes and crimes against humanity. And this opened the door for victims to seek reparations. And this is what we believe needs to happen to the Chinese Communist Party. In 2008, the UN Security Council also issued a resolution 1820 that notes that rape and other forms of sexual violence are constitutive acts of genocide. So I want to just share with you some of the ways and manners sexual violence is being perpetuated against the Uyghur women. Mass rape and torture is perpetuated by CCP guards, as described by Uyghur and Kazakh survivors in an organized and systematic manner. It furthers the goal of genocide because this violence is used to destroy Uyghur culture, family, and traditions in whole and in part by impeding in-group birth rates, undermining family structure, and by severely traumatizing Uyghur and other ethnic minorities in the region and in the diaspora. And I'd like to also give you another layer that majority of Uyghur women, 99%, are Muslims. And rape is horrific as it is, but in the Muslim context, rape carries with that so much more. The honor and the izzah of a woman, a lot of times Western journalists misunderstand this. Honor or izzah is a concept that is not the honor of the family. It is the honor of the woman herself. We have total, we own our own honor. And when a rape is committed, or when someone's hijab is pulled off, or when someone is stripped of their clothes, that is a stripping of our spiritual connection with our God. Because when we wear hijab, when we cover our bodies, this is a method of subjugating ourselves to Allah, to our God. And this is a method of giving ourselves up to God. So in this manner, it is also a spiritual abuse. It is the coming in between a woman and her God. And this is hard for someone else who might not be from the Islamic faith to understand, or who does not practice hijab or practice modesty in the sense to understand. But I wanted to share this with our audience just so you may have that background. Survivors who have escaped camps have testified to suffering serious bodily harm and destruction of their reproductive capacities that Sister Dr. Maya will go into further detail, our next speaker. The BBC reports that Tursone Ziawudun, who fled the region after her release and is now in the US, said women were removed from cells every night and raped by one or more masked Chinese men. She said she was tortured and later gang raped on 3 occasions, each time by 1 to 3 men. She also claims that 2 female guards, this was inserted a stun baton inside her and shocked her until she blacked out. In an interview I just did with Gulbahar Jalilova, she described how every 10 days they were stripped, laid out, stood up, stripped of their clothes, and made to do exercises in front of the guards, for no reason whatsoever, not exercises for their physical exercises, but just humiliating, degrading. And this is why I mentioned this earlier. The snatching, even here in the United States, when we amplify when a girl's hijab is pulled and we say that was an act of sexual violence. So can you imagine how much of an act of violence is to strip a Muslim woman of her clothes? And of course, I'm not saying that this is not horrific for any woman of any faith, but I'm speaking from an Islamic perspective. Survivor Sairogul, a teacher in the quote unquote re-education camps that the Chinese government calls them, who is now in Sweden, witnessed that the gang rape of a young woman by Chinese policemen in front of 200 detainees. Another teacher that I had the pleasure of interviewing as well, Qalbir Noor Siddiq from the capital Urumqi, who herself was she herself was forcefully inserted with an IOD, shared her experience of teaching at a camp where she heard the sounds and the screams of torture and rape while she was teaching in the classroom. She was teaching Mandarin in the classrooms. And she said, and I asked her, why do you think that they were raped? How can you prove that? And she said when the girls would walk in, girls young as 14 would walk in to back into her classroom, they would not be able to sit. They would not be able, the anguish and the pain on their faces and their bodies was visible to her. So I know I'm at my 10-minute mark. So these are some of the experiences that survivors have shared with us. And now I would like to hand it over. I do want to remind everybody that this is 100% a women's rights issue. And we hope that women across the world will take this issue on and amplify the voices of our Uighur sisters throughout this month and throughout until this genocide ends. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Hena, Zuberi, for that very sobering but very real account of the crimes against humanity that are occurring, as well as the impact of genocide, the gendered impact of genocide that a lot of people have yet to understand. I just wanted to quickly remind all of our new viewers that have been able to join us, as well as our viewers that opened the show with us today, that at any moment of time, due to the sensitive nature and of course challenging nature of the topics that we're discussing today, that should you like to take a moment of self-care and a break due to the harsh nature of the subjects, that you are more than able to at any point in time. This discussion is being recorded and broadcasted on our YouTube page right now. So that's the YouTube page for Justice for All. I am very honored as well to introduce our next panelist, female leader and speaker, who is a human rights advocate as well as an activist in her own right. And I'm introducing today Serwi Huseyin. Serwi Huseyin is a social justice and human rights advocate with the Save Uighur campaign, which is a human rights campaign under Justice for All. She's also a poet and an educator. And today she's going to be speaking with us about the enslavement and forced labor of Uyghur women. Just a little bit about Serwi before she comes on. She is a campaign lead, as we were saying, for Justice for All's Save Uyghur campaign. She's a poet and an educator, and she herself has spent time in a forced labor camp in occupied East Turkestan, otherwise known as Xinjiang district in China. Thank you for being here with us, Serwi, and I do look forward to your address today.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and hello at the same time to the honorable ladies who are attending to this special topic on unique oppression on Uyghur women in East Turkestan. Today, I will be focusing on the forced labor factory networks in East Turkestan and all across China, where Uyghur women are forced to work in long hours without pay or very minimal pay. I prepared a PowerPoint. Now I would like to share my screen because it has some videos that it will give our audiences visuals about how these Uyghur women are worked in those forced labor factories. So just give me a second. I would like to, okay, come into present mode. Okay, thank you so much for waiting for me. Yes, again, my topic is Uyghur women in forced labor factories. So before I address the issue about the Uyghur women who are forced to work in forced labor networks in East Turkestan and across China, I would like to give brief introduction about general Uyghur population, how their life is right now in East Turkestan. So it's not a myth anymore for our audiences that since 2016, millions of Uyghurs and other members of the other Turkic Muslim minorities, such as Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uzbek, Tatar, and other Turkic-speaking minority nations who live in East Turkestan, disappeared into a vast network of re-education camps in East Turkestan. Now, we know that United States of America, Canada, and the Netherlands, they have already declared that what China is doing to Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in East Turkestan is a modern-day genocide, which aims to attain their goal of demographic cleansing and forced assimilation of cultural and ethnic identity of Uyghurs and other Turkic minority nations. And inside the camps, detainees are usually subjected to political indoctrination. They are forced to renounce their religion, and they are deprived to live by following their own culture and a tradition. And then news like BBC and CNN and other media has reportedly telling the audiences that in these camps, the Uyghur population are subjected to torture and also sexual abuse. And in the name of combating religious extremism, Chinese authorities have been actively remolding the Uyghur population in the image of China's Han ethnic minority. Chinese government has facilitated the mass transfer of Uyghurs and other ethnic minority citizens from East Turkestan to factories across China and also in East Turkestan region. Under the conditions that strongly suggest forced labor, Uyghurs are working in factories that are in the supply chain of at least 82 well-known global brands in the technology, clothing, and automotive sectors, including Apple, BMW, Gap, Huawei, Nike, Samsung, Sony, Volkswagen, and many more. The report of Australian Policy Strategic Institute estimates that now more than 80,000 Uyghurs were already transferred out of East Turkestan to work in factories across China between the year of 2017 and 2019. In addition to this, so-called graduated detainees were sent directly from detention camps to the forced labor networks in East Turkestan and all across China, in a land such as Anhui, Shandong, and other provinces of China. We call it mainland or mainland China or inner land. The estimated figure is conservative, and the actual figure is likely to be far higher. In factories far away home, they typically live in segregated dormitories. They undergo organized Mandarin and ideological training outside working hours. They are subjected to constant surveillance and are forbidden from participating in religious observances. Numerous sources, including government documents, show that transferred workers are assigned minders and they have limited freedom of movement. If you take a look at this map, which is produced by Australian Policy Strategic Institute, it can tell you that how the Uyghurs and other Turkic-speaking minorities are transferred from the different parts of East Turkestan to all across China between 2017 and 2019. Data collected from the Chinese state media and official government notices indicates that more than 80,000 Uyghur workers were transferred out of East Turkestan between 2017 and 2019. I emphasize this number one more time in this slide because this is conservative and the actual number is way higher, but it is still shocking to the globe. The Chinese government's official data on labor transfer includes transfers from the southern East Turkestan to northern East Turkestan, transfers from East Turkestan to other provinces of China, and transfers to the local factories. Depending on the county, laborers sent outside East Turkestan count for anywhere between 10% to 50% of all East Turkestan transfers. In recent years, transfers from East Turkestan to the other parts of China have increased steadily. In 2017, according to the state media reports, 20,859 rural surplus laborers from East Turkestan were already transferred to work in other provinces. Other provinces means mainland China, inland China, like Shandong, Henan, Jiangxi, Jiangsu, Anhui, and so on. If you look at this map, it's going to show you how Nike has a supply chain which is originated from the East Turkestan, and it's written as Xinjiang here, and from the Hotan prefecture and from the Kashgar prefecture, Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities were transferred to a specific factory which resides in Shandong province of China. It says like Qingdao Taiguang shoe manufacturing company. And as you can see on the map, that 7 million pairs of shoes made in this factory are exported to US and other Western countries all around the globe. So we should be really careful when we buy our products. So if you look at this picture, these are the Uyghur women who are transferred forcibly from their own home and deprived of their lives that are in the family, and they are forcibly transferred to the different regions all across China. As you can see, they're all raising, like holding red flags of Communist Party of China. Here, they are forced to sing red song, Hongge. It means specific songs that praise Communist Party of China, Chairman Mao, and Xi Jinping, and praise the great unity of all Chinese nationals. And this is a picture that shows you that Uyghur women in the forced labor factory, how they are forced to attend the political and ideological classes even after the work hours. It means they have very limited freedom and they're controlled even after their work hours. Now I would like to, show you a video which is produced by BBC, and actually it's the Chinese state media propaganda footage, but it was utilized BBC when they published an article which is titled, "I will go if others go." In this video, a very young high school graduate girl whose name is Buzainab. She was forced to go to one of these forced labor factories in inland China, and she said no several times when she was forced by the Chinese officials who went inside each homes of the Uyghur population in Hotan prefecture in East Turkestan. But finally, she was forced to be transferred into one of these factories along with her friends without her own will. It's completely contradictory with what Chinese state propaganda announcement, like these Uyghur women went to these forced labor factories with their own will, and the aim of the project is actually to help these Uyghur women to escape from the poverty and provide them the job opportunities. But reality in this video footage tells you that the reality is shocking, and it is sad, and it's completely contradictory what Chinese state media pictures. Yes, when they set up the stool, and then when they announced on the big radio to the entire village that come and register for going to the inner land and work in one of our factories in there, and we are gonna promise you good pay and you will escape from the poverty. And they did propaganda like this and waiting in those chairs to for Uyghur people to register. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, she says, "Müşahede balla bansa memnun mağame" in Uyghur. It means if others go here, just my friends go and I will go. This so many just repeated enforcement of that Chinese official. In tears, she finally agreed. You see, if they go to those forced labor factories, do they cry like this? Do they give farewell to each other like this? You can absolutely see that they are in pain to make such a big decision to go. Actually, it's not a decision. It's like they are mandated. They are forced to do it, and that they have absolutely no right to decide whether to go or not. Yes, so at the end, when you are seeing that white page document, it's about a report which is produced by Nenke University scholars to the high officials. Actually, somehow it accidentally was published online, and it caught the eyes of one Uyghur academic, and then he saved it and provided to BBC. So when they looked at the document, the results are shocking. It says actually uprooting them and relocating them elsewhere in the region and in other parts of China, and they say it's going to reduce the Uyghur population density. Now, this document actually shows the true goal of the such kind of project, transferring Uyghurs and other Turkic minorities from East Turkestan to the innerland China. They would like to reduce the Uyghur population density in the area. And also they state that such projects helps them to assimilate Uyghurs and actually Chineseifying them, just melting them into the big Chinese family. So eradicating their ethnic cultural identity from the region altogether. Also, I would like to share the Professor Laura Murphy, an expert in human rights and contemporary slavery, and her statement about after seeing this BBC video. She says this video shows their motto, their true goal, and I'm sorry. She said that also the narrative is one of the lifting people out of poverty. There's a drive to entirely change people's lives, to separate families, disperse the population, change their language, their culture, and their family structures, which is more likely to increase poverty than decrease it. Because Chinese government all the time, they transfer and other ethnic minorities under the name of empowering them and boosting their economic income and promising them good life in the future. Now, I would like to focus more on Uyghur women in forced labor factory. Chinese state media propaganda as I stated earlier, that the videos which are leaked from different kinds of social media platforms of China, they say that the Uyghur women are recruited to work in such forced labor factories and forced to praise their working conditions, growth of their annual income, and a policy of Xi Jinping. They often describe that they were poor before and don't know Mandarin Chinese, and then now they are rich and their Chinese become fluent. When we turn our attention to other videos released through TikTok, Weibo, and other Chinese social media, it's not hard to see the reality. We always see that the factory workers are hundreds of Uyghur women and migrated from their own homes and forced to work in different parts of in East Turkestan or innerland cities such as Anhui, Shandong, and others. They work in these factories for long hours daily, stayed in, as I have described earlier, their dormitories are located in places far away from city centers. They are really segregated, and in these videos we often see that there are police guards are present. It means that they are surveilled by the guards, and also we see videos that they are forced to sing red songs which praises Xi Jinping and his policy, and always we see that they are forced to attend political indoctrination class for hours after work hours, and they are not even free to leave from their workplace. They're not allowed to, and they are always paid with very minimum wage or no wages. So we can all. So I'm thinking, in my personal point of view, that so usually these forced labor factory footage released from Chinese, no matter state media or other social media platforms, usually show large number, hundreds of Uyghur women are working in these factories, and always the one Chinese boss appears and how he's helping these women to get economic benefit from working in these factories. What I'm thinking that while Uyghur men are basically locked up in these concentration camps, so they are using Uyghur women in these forced labor factories, and they are benefiting them as a cheap or free labor sources. Now, I would like to show you some video footage that our team produced using the video released from the Chinese social media apps, TikTok and Weibo. We found that there are hundreds of forced labor footage like this. So all of them, yeah, I emphasize again, show that huge number of Uyghur women are utilized as free labor sources, or they are working here with minimal wages. So let's look at the first video. He said that he is given 40,000 mu. It's a kind of 40 square kilometers land by the government. He was allocated this much land in East Turkestan region, and he came from innerland. And then he was given more than 300 such women in the factory. And he said that we promised that these in this village there are more than 4,000 family who have low socioeconomic background, and by doing so, we are going to help them to escape from poverty. So I have a question for the audiences who are watching this video right now. So if government allocates 60,000 mu, 40 square kilometers of land, nearly a 10,000 acre land is allocated to this man by the government, who is the beneficiary of this project? The Uyghur women are just forced to work in these factories. This is a video. This is a video that in which, and you can see that 500 families forcibly transferred from Yorkand County in Kashgar city to Korla to do forced labor. The red banner. The red banner that we saw earlier, it says that such a red banner, Kashgar City, Yorkand County Employment Support and a Transferring Ceremony. There are hundreds of videos right now. He says that this is a walnut factory which is located in Kashgar City. So it means that this forced labor factory is located in East Turkestan. You can see that they're forced to do the manual work for long hours. And he also, at the end of the video, he promises that all of his employees are going to escape from the poverty at the end of the year. So every video has such promise in it. And we know that such videos are only just serves for the propaganda, as the propaganda of Chinese government. So this video, what you can see from this video is stunning. So when you buy products which are made in China, so you know after watching this video, you know that you have to be really careful, because the money, the income that they get for working full 1 day time in this cotton field will shock you. How much money do you make by by picking up 1 kilogram cotton? You see, if she collects 1 kilogram cotton, she can get 1 RMB. It's a 1/7 of a dollar. So she even cannot get a dollar by working for a full day in the cotton field. So in this video, you can see that not only the Uyghur women are forced to work in this factory, such little children are also utilized for help. Yeah. So by working a full 1 day, by working 1 day in the kind of walnut factory, doing such manual work, peeling the walnut skin from the walnut, she can find only 50 yuan, 50 RMB. So 1 RMB is equal to almost $7. The Chinese government is promising to give them economic opportunity, job employment opportunity, and opportunity to help them become rich. But you can see that they are not paid much at all. And if you can see that the red, before I even play the video, the red banner on the wall is there are written Uyghur words, Uyghur sentences, and Chinese sentences about how to protect the unity of the nation. And Uyghur women in this video are forced to do embroidery work for a very minimal wage for a full day. You can imagine how hard such kind of work is. So as we are talking about women today, and just what I'm seeing in all these forced labor factories are mainly women. So Chinese state propaganda video about the benefits of forced migration, and we saw it right now. The title of the upcoming video that I'm going to show, the title of the video is Moving to the Inner Land and Have a Blessed Life. The Uyghur woman is talking to the journalist about she was poor before in East Turkestan, and now actually she can make 4,000 yuan RMB, which is equal to 571 US dollars in a month with her husband here working as a factory worker. But I want you to rethink about the videos that you have watched with me earlier, that all of them all of the women in the video reportedly say that they're not getting much. Picking 1 kilogram cotton, she can only make kind of 1 RMB. If she can pick up 30 kilogram to 50 kilogram cotton manually with her hand in a day, how much money she can make? Only 30 yuan or 50 yuan RMB. It's not even close to $10 in a day.
Sister Serwi, I think we need to move on.
So this video shows a forced labor factory located in the inner land of China. So the women in here are forced to work, forced to produce manually a special cloth, which is quite welcomed in Central Asian countries such as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and other countries. We Uyghurs also value this cloth. It's called bakasam. It's like you see that if it's not like if it is factory produced, it's not as good quality as this one that handmade ones. So they are forced to work in such with such manual work all day long, and you can find that they're not even paid much. Yeah, here you can see weaving machine, and you can see a labor-intensive industry, and the female workers can weave only 6 to 10 meters per day, 6 to 10 meters per day. And that 1 month they can only find 1,000 to 1,500 RMB, and if you calculate in dollars, it's not much at all. This one is the Chinese state propaganda and how such factories are helping Uyghur women to get rich. And the Chinese words on the top of the video says transferred to other location, transferred to be blessed in life. And we have to question ourselves right now, is it a blessing or it's the punishment to Uyghur women in these forced labor factories? So thank you so much for listening to me today, and my presentation is over here.
Thank you so much, Serwi, for your time and your bravery. I just wanted to read out a comment here that we received during your presentation that really rightly summarizes all that you've presented today, which is thank you so much, dear sister, for your courage to speak up. As China is trying to control the world through propaganda, it is very important that people hear voices from Uyghur sources, such as yourself, Sister Serwi. So a lot of people are asking in the comment section, you know, what can we do? What can we do to help out? What can we do to make a difference? And I hope that our next speaker will be able to answer that question. So next we have Dr. Maya Mitalipova, who is an Uyghur activist, very prominent Uyghur activist and human rights advocate in her own right. She also happens to be an activist, a scientist, a researcher, as well as director of the Human Stem Cell Laboratory at Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research at the Michigan Institute of Technology, otherwise known as MIT. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Maya.
It's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts, not Michigan, just to correct you.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. My name is actually Uighur as a Maysam. I've been known as a Maya in my field, in my scientific field, but lots of Uyghurs call me Maysam. I'm Uyghur from Almaty and been living in the United States for 25 years. I myself have relatives in East Turkestan who are about 10 relatives from my dad's side are detained in camps and prisons. And my mom has also over 30 relatives, her two uncles in Urumqi, and extended family of over 50, and the fate of those family members I cannot find, even I tried to search for them. I want to take an opportunity today and to thank organizers of this panel for inviting me to speak about the topic concern of my beloved Uyghurs. But I also want to remind to audience that it's International Women's Day, and I want to take opportunity to congratulate entire world women of entire world, because women are a future for any generations, for any nations, for any community, for any country. The women are the ones who gives rise to next generation, gives birth to children. And it's not just they give the birth, but they carry a unique responsibility to teach those kids to the values of humanitarian values. And those values are common across entire world, across every community, every nationality, and every country. And this is no difference for my beloved Uyghur woman. And if I look around the world, there is a lot of injustice is happening in many corners of this world. But if we take in general, it's probably, and I'm sure I'm not biased here to say that in 21st century, in today, when we live in 2021, Uyghur women are facing the most oppression towards their family, towards their fate, towards their religion, towards their well-being, physical, mental, and I wouldn't be probably exaggerated here to say that Uyghur women are the most oppressed women at today in today. So I has been given the topic to speak about the forced sterilization and organ harvesting, which both of these topics are even hard to imagine what it means to be forcefully, for women to be forcefully sterilized. It means that she has no pride to be anymore as a woman. How she can live the rest of her life knowing that she cannot give a birth, or she had gone through procedure when she was she aborted unborn child. And this is horrendous practices right now is happening towards not only Uyghur women, but women of Turkic origin in East Turkestan. The Chinese government is not taking these draconian measures to slash birth rates among Uyghurs and other Turkic minorities as a part of sweeping campaign to reduce Muslim, Uyghur, or Turkic population, even by encouraging Han Chinese majority in East Turkestan to have more children compared to Uyghur families in order to reach the goal of assimilating and reducing population of Turkic people. And I don't want to say, because there is a term that's been used towards Uyghurs and other Turkic ethnicities in East Turkestan as a minorities. If we take East Turkestan as it used to be its own country until 1949, this is not a minority. It's probably minority for China, for entire China, but for East Turkestan, this was a majority of the population in East Turkestan. And Chinese government always, in the history of hundreds of years, and especially after occupying this region until 1945, statistically always reduced the number of Turkic people of East Turkestan, which majority of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Uzbeks, Kyrgyz, Tatars, and other ethnic groups. While individual women spoken out about the forced birth control before 2016 and 2017, the practice has been implicated way many years before in order to reduce the population of Turkic people in East Turkestan. But after 2016, or even we would say after Xi Jinping visited in 2014, this has become as a systematic practice compared to previously known as a based on Chinese government statistics. It's actually coming from statistics documents, and so they have implemented intrauterine devices. And this is not only to a woman who actually had too many children. For example, right now from 2017, the law in East Turkestan has changed. So the women of East Turkestan can have up to 3, this is the law, they can have up to 3 children, where Han Chinese can, in China alone, can have 2 children. But this practice has been misused by authorities in East Turkestan, and women being hunted, families being hunted. There are the raids into the family in the night when they are looking for hidden children in somewhere that they have not been accounted in the family. And as a way of punishment, if they found that the family has more than 3 children, so then these women or parents, together with fathers, they would be sent to detention camps, which we know that they call as re-education camps. And this is entire, like, from the leaked documents of Karakash County in East Turkestan in 2017, from the entire population of camp detainees, 30% of detainees were detained there for the reason of having too many children, meaning that they had more than 3 children in the family. So while the parents were taken to the camps, they left 3 children in the family. Either they would have been taken care by grandparents in rare cases, but in majority cases, those children were separated from, and they were taken to orphanages, which is also are at the detention centers, where the children are not allowed to speak on their own languages. So the entire system of the family and the community was destroyed by Chinese government. In order to prevent birth rates, a woman in East Turkestan are taken to the hospitals and are forced to be checked for pregnancy, and they've been introduced IUD, it's an intrauterine devices in order to prevent pregnancies. And this was implicated not only inserted not only to women of the ages which they would become pregnant, but also to the women who are over 45 years old. And what is the consequences after introducing IUDs? In many cases, women would have unstopped bleeding, and this would actually affect their health. But after removal of this IUD, the women literally were sterilized because they would not be able to have any more children. But that was not only the case. Chinese government had injected and forcefully punished many young women to take unknown substances or medical in order to stop their periods in detention. So the woman, especially the young age, would have would stop their periods, and if they were released from detention and survived these horrific conditions, these women find out when they had health check after detention, pretty much 90% of those women, they were sterilized. Many women who've been found pregnant, especially this pregnancy was with the fourth child or the third child, they were forced to do abortion. And the abortion was carried out on a woman who was already after their first trimester in their pregnancies, which leads to enormous health consequences to women, and not talking about unborn child. And this leads to unimaginable mental trauma, not only on women, but also on the entire family. And these facts we found out from the former detainees who came to Europe and to United States, but also from many women in Kazakhstan who are Kazakh origin, and they moved to Kazakhstan because they had their family members in Kazakhstan, or they carried a Kazakhstan citizenship, or they carried Kazakhstan if not citizenship, but they would carry their green cards in Kazakhstan to leave. Their husbands were from Kazakhstan. So this is unprecedented violation of women's rights in East Turkestan. And it's not only, this has not been, these practices were not carried out to Han Chinese women in East Turkestan. So what I'm telling you, this is happening only to Turkic women in East Turkestan today. So birth rate, just as an example, birth rate in one of the more dense by Uyghur population counties in East Turkestan, like Kashgar and Hotan, has declined to 24% in just in 2 years. And this is it has declined to 60% in only in Hotan and Kashgar counties, or prefectures, which actually, if you look at across the entire East Turkestan, birth rate just in 2 years, from 2017 to 2019, this is according to official Chinese statistics, which are leaked out. And there are some researchers who actually researched this. Across entire East Turkestan, birth rate has actually declined in just 2 and 3 years to 24% in 1 year alone of 2000, I think 2020 or 2019. This is actually just as a compare, if you compare to 4.2% in entire China. So 24% in entire East Turkestan versus 4.2% to compared to China. This is the birth rate, how it's declining. This is definitely as I said, in detention camps in Karakash County, 30% of detainees were there only for having too many children. This is the most common reason for holding them in detention camps. In 2017, Xinjiang government had tripled already hefty fine of $3,000 for if you have a third child or fourth child. This is the fine which is actually 3 times of the annual income in a rural area of East Turkestan. Imagine if the family decided to have a third child, you will pay the fine of $3,000, which no family in those rural area can afford it. And people are scared to get into detention. And there are some former ex-detainees who are in United States. When they've been interviewed, they told that in their inmates in their detention, they had some doctors, Uyghur doctors, women, who actually helped to do a delivery of the babies in the houses of Uyghur families. And for that reason, those Uyghur doctors were detained into the camps. And it's known that there are some drugs that been given orally or injected to entire population of women in detention or even outside of detention. And those drugs actually found out one of the drug is named as Depo-Provera, and the side effects are extensive bleeding, fatigue, loss of appetite, dizziness, and so on and so on. And this is a hormonal treatment, not for months or even for a couple of months or 1 month. This is when they were injected for years. And after this hormonal treatment, lots of young women, if they came out of detention, they are practically sterilized. They can never have children again. In 2014, the number of IUD that been inserted into women in East Turkestan was about 200,000. And then just as a comparison, in 2018, that number jumped to 60% higher. So this is how many women have been literally sterilized in East Turkestan. And I will not talk about what happens to Turkic women, Uyghur and other Kazakh women, rape, not only sterilization, but physical torture and so on, because I'm responsible here to talk about sterilization. And this is what Uyghur women are facing. And we're talking about women from age of 18 to 50 and plus. And another things that I want to speak about. This is forced organ harvesting. This topic is horrendous practice in China, and I think on the state level, this happens only in the entire world. This happens only in China, and as a we know that this practice is happening for over now 30 years, starting from 25 to 30 years. This practice has started in the late 90s. And why does it didn't happen earlier? Because this entire entire procedure of organ transplantation has not been developed until 1990s in the entire world, and that's probably why this horrendous practice was not implemented in China before. But when this practice was already known in medical field across the globe, China was the first who actually jumped into wagon and started using it against minorities or against people who were not for who were freedom loving, or people who would have some faith, or religious people, and even people who wanted to practice like Falun Gong practitioners. But I have to mention that this practice actually has started in East Turkestan. And we know it in 1997 in a massacre in Guljar. We already know the cases when young Uyghur men were killed for their organs in detention. And right now, knowing that millions, not 3, but over 5 millions or 8 millions of Uyghurs and other Turkic people who are in detention, their rights have been, of course, they can be used for forced organ harvesting. In China, official number of organs that they do organ transplantation, it's about 10,000 per year. But we know that unofficially it consists about 100,000. And then just recently, by a report from Ethan Goodman, is a researcher on this topic. So he had interviewed quite a lot of former detainees, and his estimate for forced organ harvesting in detention in East Turkestan, it's between 25,000 to 50,000 a year. So this is a young people under the age of 30, starting about 25 to 35 years old, who are subject to this horrendous practice. And Uyghur women are not an exception. And if you look what it would cost for Chinese government, this is a state-funded practice in China, and the one person, if their organs been sold, this would be worth of about 700,000 to 1 million from one person. So on this, I would like, because I think my time is over, I would rather take questions on this topic. And again, I want to take an opportunity to congratulate all women, and especially I would like to congratulate Uyghur women with International Women's Day. And I encourage all women to speak up for the rights of any oppressed woman in the entire world. And I would like to ask a woman, Muslim, non-Muslim, of any faith, to stand up for my beloved Uyghur women's right. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maya from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I really appreciated your address, and I know one-on-one that you are also part of a few significant Canadian-led human rights coalitions, and you do a lot of really great work for them. So I appreciate your time here today. We do have a few questions coming in, specifically in the Zoom chat, that I do encourage all of our panelists just to take a look at. Due to a little bit of lack of time, I did want to try to move on to our next speaker, simply because she's joining us all the way from South Africa, where it's, I think, close to midnight, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that she has a few kind of efforts to tend to, a few commitments to tend to on her end. So without further ado, Miss Shamsaden Sayed from the South African National Museum Women's Foundation, and she is also joining us here representing the Sayed Global Productions. She'll be speaking with us regarding lessons from the apartheid. A little bit about her today. She's a CEO and spokesperson for the South African National Muslim Women's Forum. She's also managing director of the Sayed Global Productions. Welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us, Shamsaden. I just wanted to double check with our moderators behind the scene that Miss Shamsaden Sayed is available to jump on and to share.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
All right. Can you see me? Saliha, can you see me?
Check. We cannot see you just yet. No. Maybe
okay.
if you just double check your camera, if that's okay.
Right. Let me just see. Can you see me now?
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Fine. All right. Shukran, Jazilan. Thank you very much, Sister Saliha. Yes, it's actually 12:25 out here in South Africa. Sister Yvonne, I can see you there as well. Yes, thank you for having me. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the women out there for the phenomenal work that you are doing. Sister Hena Zuberi for hosting this fantastic conference. And we hope that this will be an awareness thing for women globally. And thank God for social media. My topic is not an easy one because, you know, we still, I think, suffering the effects of apartheid in South Africa from here in the southern tip of Africa and southern Africa. You know, if you look at what apartheid was, it's a completely inhumane, a brutal, totally, sometimes they say there's no words for it. But when I'm listening to what your sisters are talking about, what's happening to the women in East Turkestan, to our Uyghur sisters, it makes some parts of apartheid look like a picnic. But having said that, it's quite late to us. I'm going to use my glasses to read a bit here. I just want to mention to you that when you look at apartheid in South Africa, you know, it was institutionalized and very much like what is happening to our sisters and the community in East Turkestan, the Uyghur population. You know, the forced indoctrination, the forced migration. I'm trying to make notes to the esteemed speakers that came before us, and it made me tear, and I actually moved this off the screen to wipe a tear or two. You know, it hits home because it changes the very essence of your life. And it's unimaginable. One, I think Professor Dr. Maya mentioned that women are the center of homes. Yes, you are the nucleus of the homes, with the nucleus of society, with the nucleus of the community. On our laps, great prophets and great saints and great pharaohs have been born. We mold communities, we mold societies. And when that power is taken away from you, it takes away the entire power of the community. So yes, it is a battle that we all have to fight together. So I'm going to share some of the ideas that, you know, people in South Africa, mother in South Africa, fought against and strategized against the brutal system of apartheid, which was institutionalized, as I said. We still have racism throughout the world. We have a bit of xenophobia in South Africa. We have a kind of Afrophobia in South Africa, but it's not institutionalized the way the brutal system and dictatorship of apartheid was. Again, it is imposing the will of one on the other. But the difference between the Uyghur population in South Africa was you had a minority government imposing its will on a majority population, while here in East Turkestan, you have a huge massive machinery, state machinery, imposing its will on a tiny minority. It makes the battle for the Uyghur people much more difficult. And that is why the international community, the global community, the external community has to play a critical and vital role. And we have to stir the conscience of the international community to galvanize them into some form of action. So I'm going to share with you some ideas. You know, the struggle for apartheid, it was a local one. You know, it was protests, etc., and then it moved into an armed struggle. And I'm sure that kind of strategy won't work with the Uyghur people because of the heavy-handedness the people will have to face. It's already, without any protest, the kind of oppression and brutalities they are facing. So the story gets much more tougher for our brothers and sisters and humanity out there, the Uyghur population. You know, if you're looking at the struggle in South Africa, it became I think the tipping point, you know, was when it became internationalized. I think with social media for the Uyghur situation, the social media is playing a big part, and that's why Sister Hena Zuberi, your organization, is doing a fantastic job. We're hearing firsthand from the sisters who are from the region, going through the 3 years of all the brutalities, etc. And one can just imagine the pain they and their families are going through for separation, etc. But having said that, you know, if you're looking at we need to look at what is the Achilles heel of the Chinese government. Never underestimate what ordinary people can do out here in South Africa, out there in the world. The Achilles heel for the South African government was the economic aspect. And what had really hit them hard was the shipping industry. We found that dock workers, mine workers had affiliated to the Congress of South African Trade Unions out here in South Africa, and they refused to offload South African goods at the shipping, at the ports in San Francisco, as well as out here under in Australia. And that began to weigh down on an already economically drained South Africa. So these strategies can work. So we need to look, and I think we all should think this way. Somebody mentioned, I think in the comment section, that we should look at boycotting and, you know, we should also divest. And Nike is a brand that comes to mind. I think we're going to give some homework for our sisters who spoke before us, is to give us a list. You know, when we spoke about, you know, assisting the Palestinian people, there was already a list of what items do you boycott, so that it becomes it is Achilles heel for that oppressive government. But out here for the Chinese, what is the real Achilles heel for them? Because China is an economic superpower at the moment, but we need to get to the real, you know, to the Achilles heel as it is. For South Africa, it's a small country. It was not an economic giant. It was one of the economic strong countries, but it was reduced with sanctions and divestments, etc. Added to that, the role played by the Uyghur community. I think one question I'd like to ask, how easy or how difficult, or what can the world community do to assist the people living in the region to raise the alarm to the world on a daily basis on what is happening, so we can take this to the United Nations? I mean, we may say it's toothless, but at the end of the day, to get the attention of the world, for the world of the United Nations to do something about it. And I think there are some policies that have come out, etc. But right now, I think the world needs to know exactly what is being done on a daily basis. We use this kind of strategy also when we're dealing with atrocities being committed in the silent genocide of the Himalayas, which is also out in Kashmir. But that's, you know, as Sister said, if you look throughout the world, there is brutalities against some sort of people or another. But as she rightly said, the kind of atrocities and brutalities faced by the Uyghur population is much more difficult. But again, to point out some things, you know, if you can make friends the way South African community did, if you look at the Ravonia trialists, where did they meet? They didn't meet in the townships. They didn't meet in the area where the government would find them. They met in the privileged areas. You know, they didn't meet in the locations or the townships where, you know, it was parallel development. You had the blacks, they had the coloreds, you had the Indians, they had the whites, etc. They met in a privileged community. They enlisted the support of the privileged ruling classes as well. So, you know, they exhausted the legal fraternity. The people within them spoke to them and said to them, internationally, this is against against international law. So perhaps we can find those kind of people within the Chinese community who have a heart for humanity, who are humanitarians, lawyers, people who once alerted to exactly what is happening to the Uyghur population. What can they do? Would they be such kind of people that are willing to listen to the plight of the Uyghur people and to sympathize with them, and then to use their power within the Chinese community to assist the Uyghur case? And I think there are one or two I've read online, some people speaking out against what is being done. Another important aspect is to look at a kind of uh, leadership in exile of Uyghur people, of Uyghur leaders in exile. Are there such people like Professor Maya, Dr. Maya? You mentioned you are Uyghur by descent. Are there enough communities like yourself out there that can assist in galvanizing, supporting the different countries and forming then a central leadership in exile to fight for the cause of justice for the people or the Uyghur people? So these are the kinds of things, and then enlisting the legal fraternities in your communities, and then taking this, if we have to, even to The Hague. So nothing is impossible, with social media is one ambit, but getting people galvanized through social media and through forums like this, I think is constructive, and it can be used in a very positive way. So yes, and then I don't know much about the passiveness or militancy of the people, or the ability to speak out. We had, although we were under brutal dictatorship, we were not allowed to speak, we're not allowed to gather, we're not allowed, but arising out of that, people used to gather, and they used to, make their voices heard to say, this system is not, is incorrect. And I know I can somewhat understand from the speakers before and from what I've read, how difficult it is with the kind of atrocities that the people face in East Turkestan because of the strong arm of the law. But somewhere we need to try. We need to have, there has to be a loophole somewhere that can be used, where voices can be raised within the communities that they live in, inshallah. And also, because that the defiance campaign was part of, is very successfully in this country, where it enlisted the support of all major sections of all races, and it sort of united the different communities. Although, and it became into a mass democratic movement, which was one part, all this together then formed the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and finally led, as I said, with the Achilles heel, which is the economic stabbing of the apartheid system, and bring it down to its knees and enforcing them into a political settlement. So yes, we had also a combination of, as I said, the armed struggle, but perhaps that is out of the question for now. But using all this kind of strategies, people within the East Turkestan community, people out here in South Africa, what can we do on a daily basis to address the conscience of the world, to say that this has to be done so that we can reach the next stage and the following stage, etc. So this is the kind of strategies, just scratching the surface, because I know we're quite running out of time, but I think it's about time that we use, a strategy that must hurt the oppressive state. We need to find out what is that will hurt them the most, that will bring them down to be able to, perhaps to the negotiating table, to say, we will stop this, or we will, repeal these laws, or something to that effect. Maybe I'm just too optimistic looking at some of the strategies being used, that was used by the South African people and the local as well as international activists, and to let it be known to the world and let China know you're an unjust, you're an oppressive state, and you are, and it's a known for historical political fact that wherever things are forced upon, laws are forced upon people, where there's injustice, it won't last. But in the interim, what can we do to have these laws repealed? What can the international community, in what strategy do we use? Let's put our thinking hats on, form a think tank. How do we constructively divest besides the boycott, divest in China. I know South Africa is part of BRICS, which is of which China is a very critical part of it. But I think there is a lot of humanity in South Africa to go around, because with all that, we need to also do social upliftment from our side, which is what our organization is all about, to do social upliftment. And if you look at liberation movements, they were successful because they started out, they commenced with the genesis of it was trying to uplift humanity while fighting for against injustice at the same time. So you need that powerful leadership together with social, internal, external, global assistance as well. And we are in a very difficult climate right now. I know in South Africa was fortunate in the sense that it was just post-war, post-Cold War. There was a tendency, or there was a mind, there was a heart for amicability, and it favored South Africa in that sense. We are in the throes of COVID-19. It's a difficult situation, but I'm hoping that there's some kind of humanity that that is so global at the moment will be used, to assist in trying to get the world attention to the plight of the Uyghur people. And it's horrendous to say the least. It's absolutely horrendous to say the least. But we need to start somewhere. Right now, I think many people who are listening, even an ordinary audience, will say, but we didn't know this. Now there is not an excuse. You now know, we're no longer ignorant. We need to start somewhere. I just want to give you an idea what the power of women was. In South Africa, there was protest. It was passive. Yes, there was, the placards being held, there were secret meetings, all that was happening. But a critical thing happened in this country. On 9th of August, we celebrate South African National Women's Day. And why? Because on 9th August 1956, 4 women, a white woman, Helen Joseph, a black woman, Lillian Ngoyi, a Muslim Indian woman, Rahima Musa, and a colored woman who still is surviving at the moment, Sophie Williams de Bruyn, led a march to the Union Buildings, which is the executive ruling headquarters of South Africa in Pretoria. They marched to hand in the abhorrent pass, which is like a passport for black people to walk, to leave their location. In those parallel development, if they to move from their location to another area, they needed to carry the terrible pass. And they handed those passes in. They were arrested. But even in prison, there was that the segregation, and the whites were given preferential treatment, and the non-whites were given. So, but it didn't stop them from speaking. Those privileged people then used their power to tell others in their communities, this is what is being done by our government. We cannot be free until our fellow patriots are free. So that kind of mindset was then created, which then led to Sharpeville in 1961, where it was, it led to the 1976 riots, and it led to the armed struggle. And you find that after the dock workers getting involved, and then also the international community galvanizing. So you had this Achilles heel, which is the hitting at the economy, the economic strength of South Africa. With the economic strength, they were able to buy arms, they were able to subjugate people, they were able to use the massive military and police force in order to brutalize the people. But it was with the Women's March that this war cry was coined, strike a woman and you strike a rock. Until today, at every Women's Day celebration, every year, it's a national public holiday, 9th of August, Women's Day. And that's the day that people repeat this war cry, because the struggle for liberation has not ended, because the real pandemic in South Africa, and this is a very important point, is gender-based violence. There are more women dying of gender-based violence in South Africa than they die of the pandemic, for example. And our president rightly said that the other pandemic in this country is gender-based violence. And I think at the opening, Sister Salia, our very esteemed MC, mentioned that we should talk about the gender thing. We still have this, so the struggle continues in this country, and we have some kind of expertise in trying to deal with it. We can discuss it at another forum, but what I'm trying to say to you is these are some pointers, just scratching the ice, because given 5 minutes, I'm trying to push it. It is past midnight, so if I'm rushing through it, I don't want to take up your time. And just to give you scratch the surface to say that we are here, we are ready to do what you tell us to do to our Uyghur sisters. We are ready to do what you tell us to do. We've got massive ground support of women. Belong to an organization. There's over 250 forums, you know, they do social upliftment on a daily basis. And some of our women have lost their beloveds, their husbands, their children, their families, their parents to the pandemic and other, you know, and some have lost their lives to gender-based violence. But once again, we rise above the struggle because the struggle does continue and we have to think ahead. There are three ways we can fight this from the Muslim perspective, Islamic perspective. One is to talk, is to pray, which we do every day. As you said, Sister Hena Zuberi will know, we pray for Sister Afia Siddiqui, who's become the poster child for struggle for women, for liberation of women who's, you know, unjustly incarcerated out there in Texas. To pray, and then secondly, to use our words, which you are doing now, using this platform to be able to speak truth to power, to speak in the belly of the beast, so to speak, and to speak truth to power using the freedom of expression that we have. And lastly, you know, action. Now we're asking you for action. How and what do we do to raise the conscience and to stir the conscience of the international community to the plight of our Uyghur communities? I've shared with you some pointers. I don't know if it'll work because, as I said, we had the reverse situation. We had a minority government imposing its will on a majority of its people. And here in your situation, it's the most brutal, most horrendous, most challenging situation because you have a massive state, oppressive arm of the state using its massive power over the people, using, you know, separating the very essence of life, which is the family, using the most powerful individual, the most powerful creation, which is the woman, to destroy the community. We are here to help and we're ever ready to listen. Thank you for having me, and I wish everyone the best to the panel. And Sister Hena Zuberi, once again, shukran for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shamsa. Thank you so much for your very heartfelt information. My favorite part was about the part about accountability, as well as zoning in on the weaknesses of the Chinese Communist government. And that's something that's very good to keep in mind for us here on the ground. Before I introduce our next speaker, I just wanted to share a kind note to all of our panelists that we are currently trying to account for the longer presentations in the beginning. So I just kindly ask everyone to limit their address to 5 to 7 minutes, if that's all right. Next, we do have the amazing Zubayra Shamsaden of the Uighur Human Rights Project. She joins us as the representative of this amazing nonprofit organization, which does promote the rights of Uyghurs as well as Turkic Muslim peoples in East Turkestan through different methods such as research-based advocacy. Her organization also publishes reports and analysis defending Uyghurs from their defending their sense of civil, political, social, cultural, and economic rights according to international human rights standards. Today, Zubayra will be speaking with us about forced marriages, family separation, and Chinese propaganda impacts on Uyghur Muslim women and girls. Thank you for joining us, Zubayra.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, and hello everyone. And thank you for having me. And it is my honor to be in such a distinguished panelists. And I'm just really glad to be here today with you to discuss about the Uyghur crisis. And especially I would like to thank everyone, each one of you who are gathered today and thinking about the Uyghur crisis, and especially thinking about oppressed Uyghur and other Turkic women who are still suffering in the Chinese concentration camps as well as outside the camps. I have a PowerPoint to share. Just give me a few seconds to share my PowerPoint on the screen. Can you see?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you so much.
Okay, fantastic. I would like to thank especially Hena. I mean, my previous distinguished speakers, you already covered quite comprehensively about the Uyghur crisis and what's happening to Uyghur people. As my dear sister Saliha mentioned, Saliha, by the way, you have my sister's name. I have a sister, her name is Saliha, and my sister herself was directly a person who was suffered under Chinese oppression, and she had horrendous experience. I wrote about her an article which is published in Diplomat. I am sharing it in this chat box if anyone wants to interest in reading, because the Uyghur suffering is not something that just happening since 2016 or 17. It was there since 1949, which is Chinese communist government occupied East Turkestan. So if you wish to know more about what's happening and the background, the information and the history, I recommend all the distinguished panelists and attendees to read this article, which I have shared on chat box and about my sister Saliha. And also I have my email address on the screen right now that you can see. From that, you also be able to contact us directly, because I am really impressed the previous speakers and other panelists and the people here who really wish to do something about the Uyghur crisis. And as an organization, we are very happy to get connected with you and do works together. So this is here my email address on the screen. Okay, let me just be brief about what I'm going to present. As Sister Saliha mentioned, I just would like to talk about forced marriage, family separation, and also Chinese propaganda. So I am sharing the screen, but I'm going to just go through quickly because I'm not going to talk about everything, but you can see what's happening. It's a bit of information about the concentration camps, or China called so-called re-education camps, and how it established, as well as the numbers and how it's appearing in East Turkestan throughout everywhere. This is all just a statistical information, and it's all based on the research documents, and the researchers even did most of the documentation based on Chinese official sources. And you can see, it's about the camps, and it's imagery, how they all look like, and also people who are arrested, disappeared, or killed and still in the camps right now. And also how the people were sent to concentration camps. And I just put a few the signs of extremism, which is how China calls it. But probably I can come back to it again if needed. Just a few in here, like for example, just simply practicing Islamic norms and the traditions, also extremism. That's how Chinese government see. Just communicating with others or traveling outside of China, watching a foreign movie, having documents in Uyghur or Arabic script, refusing to give biometric or electronic data, refusing to allow government officials to sleep in your bed with you, eat your food, or live in your house, which is that reflects what Sister Hena described before about how Chinese governments forced a relative program, which is aimed to monitor Uyghur families and just attacking on privacy of Uyghur life. So this is also describes how it appears, and also attempting to suicide when being arrested and detained because of the all harsh, torturous conditions of the detention camps. Some people try to suicide, definitely, and those kind of actions also classified as extremism and punished by the Chinese government. So this is just a briefly, and this is a kind of artifacts or things that if people keep these kind of things, like, simply prayer mat, if you keep those kind of objects at home, you are also extremist too. That's the kind of reason that you can send to concentration camps. And again, it's how the Chinese government is syncretizing the religion, forcing people to just to give up religion completely. You denounce Allah and you should obey China's Communist Party and Chinese country. That's the things that appears as a picture here. And now I just wish to briefly show a picture, or just the side of things that which is Sister Hena already just very concisely in detail talked about a force to become relatives with Chinese officials. And it is simply just kind of aimed to monitoring Uyghur lives and assimilate Uyghur people into Han Chinese culture and just humiliation. And also it's just a straight attack on privacy and people's dignity. So this is how it looks. This is how it allocated Chinese, see here, officials into Uyghur homes to force them to kind of act, I mean, not act, it's just, you know, force you to live with them and become relative. And you can see it's really offensive and even just disturbing and, you know, disgusting kind of things, especially if you're as a Muslim. This is the things just absolutely unacceptable actions. And the forced marriage, this is another way of Chinese governments assimilating Uyghurs or just completely eradicating Uyghur as ethnic people, because this is another way. So if the Uyghur Muslim woman forced to marry non-believer, atheist, Chinese communist people, you know, settlers or officials, it is another way that we can lose our identity and our roots. And this is another just to exact a practical way of Chinese government's policy of rooting out, just, you know, cut off your roots or cut off your lineage or cut off your culture from your origin. So this is another way of eradicating or try to eradicate Uyghur people from earth. So this is a way that how Chinese government is forcing Uyghur girls to marry Han Chinese. And this is really offensive, and the impact and how it's happening to Uyghur society, it's already been kind of really discussed, I mean, or already kind of said in Sister Zubayra, I mean, Hena, and as well as Sister Serwi Husein's presentations. So I don't wish to repeat that. Forced marriage, definitely another way of or the practice of genocide against the Uyghurs in order to decrease our population and just completely get rid of our culture and ethnicity. This is a very famous picture that I'm sure everyone is familiar with it. So I just brought up to show how the concentration camps looks like, and how, you know, even in terms of forced marriage, you know, so the Uyghur women are forced to marry the Han Chinese and settlers or officials. And if those Uyghur women refuse to do so, and they get punished, you know, they just frightened and are punished, you know, the family members will send to concentration camps. That means, you know, parents, fathers, brothers would send to concentration camps like that. And it is another way of just punishing Uyghurs with a double sword. And now I just would like to briefly talk about Chinese government's disinformation and the propaganda, Chinese propaganda. In here, I'm just showing you the picture of a cover page of the report that produced by Uyghur Human Rights Project. The title of the report is "The Happiest Muslims in the World and Disinformation, Propaganda and the Uyghur Crisis." Why I brought up this title pages, I would recommend everyone to just read it, because there are a lot to talk about it. And this is really details about how Chinese government is running disinformation and the Chinese propaganda in the world. Here, I just wish to briefly talk about a few things. For example, in terms of the concentration camp or China's so-called re-education camps, in 2017, the Chinese government issued secret orders to ramp up camps and classified instructions on maintaining security. And then in August, a Chinese official says people in the region are the happiest Muslims in the world. So we are very happy. And then later, has been reports surfaced in the world and the media everywhere, and then the Chinese government started to deny it. Like, for example, at the UN in August 2018, the Chinese official Hu Lianghe says there is no such a thing as re-education camps or re-education centers. And completely they have denied. And when the eyewitness testified about their experience in the camps, and also there are reports that produced by the researchers, and the lots of things even just came out from the Chinese documents, and Chinese government start to shift narrative. And they said that the Chinese government in October 2018 said, the officials, even Chinese officials admit that there are re-education centers, but said that they are for vocational training. And then when that vocational training, and they said it's kind of solution to extremism, as I just briefly told you before, the extremism the China government so-called, it's very simple thing, just simply being a Uyghur or just the practicing Islamic practices or all other cultural practices were classified or just to accuse the Uyghurs as an extremist. That's the Chinese government what say is the concentration camps, so it's kind of solution that thought of or just created by the Chinese government. And then when it came to in July 2019, the China's the Xinjiang governor, the Shohrat Zakir, he announced that 90% of the students, so-called students, they graduated from the school and allocated for work. But later, and then it began to surface on the world that there are lots of forced labor schemes. The Chinese government start to the so-called graduation of the students. It means either those students were sentenced for further sentence, the long-term jail sentence, or sent to forced labor factories in China, or different parts of China. And this is one of the satellite imagery how Chinese government is transferring detainees from East Turkestan to mainland China to work in the factories. And I just wish to here briefly mention about the family separation. And I'm just quoting a report, a documentation by the researcher Adrian Zenz. And according to him, a total of 88,500 children, including those whose parents are absent, which is either sent to concentration camps or sentenced or in jail, were living in boarding facilities by 2019. That means nearly 1 million children were separated from the families. And that also shows that an increase of about 76% from the 2017. So this is another horrific evidence that shows that how Chinese government wish to completely just to eradicate Uyghur people as a whole, as a people, because those children who were separated from the families, not only they will be deprived from the family life as a children, they will be just completely brainwashed from the childhood that completely isolated, that as deprived the opportunity of as a growing up as a Uyghur. So they will be kind of lost generation in the future. So definitely this is another way of genocide against the Uyghurs. So this is also horrific. And again, as I just told you before about the Chinese government's different, the propaganda and the disinformation, they said that the camps were closed and the people were graduated, but in reality later, there are lots of eyewitness testimonies, not just to witness testimony, and also lots of people stood up and are talking about disappeared family members. This is just to kind of tips of iceberg, but there are so many, just to list a few to see the face of those disappearances. I would like to stop here. I leave the rest of the time for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, I'm quite happy to answer about anything that I have presented or I have not. So, and also I just wish to show a few slides that if you wish to learn more about the current genocide happening to Uyghurs and the other Turkic people in East Turkestan, you can visit those pages or those campaigns that you can go through. And also I would like to recommend that you can visit our website and follow us on the social media, because As Sister Saliha introduced, UHRP is a research and a documentation-based organization and will advocate for Uyghurs' rights from Washington, D.C. And also, lastly, I would like to just bring up this page because if anyone wishes to do anything to help at the time of genocide, so this is at least 7 things that you can do to help Uyghurs. This is again available on our website. You can visit our website and you can just look through and please support. I'm going to stop here. So I would like to thank you again and again take this opportunity to congratulate your International Women's Day, and especially on this special day that you thinking of oppressed Uyghur women and your support for the Uyghurs. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you for all of your time and sharing this really invaluable research, Sister Zubayra. And of course, it's quite endearing to learn that I share your sister's first name. And I do wish the best, all peace, love, and safety for your sister Saliha. At this time, we wanted to try to prioritize our esteemed speakers from the UK as well as from South Africa that are unfortunately having a little bit of a later time in the evening from their respective regions. So we were going to end off with Miss Yvonne Ridley, but no problem. It's my pleasure to introduce her next. Many people are quite familiar with Yvonne Ridley's work. Of course, she's a British journalist, but just for those who might not be too familiar, she's a well-known supporter of women's rights, and she's a tireless human rights campaigner for all kinds of atrocities in the world. She was previously nominated for a 2019 Nobel Peace Prize for her work that highlights the atrocities committed against Syrian as well as Rohingya women. Today, UK journalist Miss Yvonne is going to be speaking with us about how to raise our voice for Uyghur women. And this was actually a very frequent question here on our chat. So thank you for taking this topic up, Miss Yvonne.
Thank you very much for that, Salia. And oh, that's my grandfather clock going off in the background.
No problem.
That was a great presentation, Zubayra, and of course the statistics are horrific that you showed us there. Having walked through the killing fields of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Palestine, there's one thing that they all have in common, that those in the firing line of war and conflict, the ones who suffer the most, are women and their children. Without exception, their treatment at the hands of an often unseen enemy is absolutely barbaric. Of course, it would be easy to dismiss the enemy as being men only, but I have to say the patriarchy in the world today do start most of the wars. The misogynistic propelled governments from all points of the compass have much to answer for when you look around at our planet. The superpowers, all of them, have blood on their hands without exception. Even those who say that they don't embroil themselves in wars are quite prepared to sell weapons to those who do. But it's not just traditional armies to blame for genocidal behavior. The Rohingya Muslims, for instance, have not gone to war with anyone, yet the world looked on with almost a casual eye as 760,000 men, women and children fled Myanmar at the hands of a brutal military. I have to admit today I'm really conflicted by the plight of Aung San Suu Kyi. I remember campaigning, protesting and signing petitions to call for the end to her house arrest. And I think many of us had high hopes when she was released and the country held elections. You know, we all thought that she would be the female version of Nelson Mandela. Sadly, she presided with the military over the genocidal acts carried out on the Rohingya. And I went to the refugee camps, and the stories that the women told me were horrific, not dissimilar to what we have heard in this forum tonight. So what are we to make of the Uyghur suffering and at the hands of China, a superpower waiting in the wings? It's hard to know where to begin. We have words to describe the rape, torture, sodomy, and abuse many of these women have endured. Human rights groups like to use the term gender-based violence. The term gender-based violence against women are obviously acts against a woman because she is a woman or that affect women disproportionately. But as I say, we've heard some harrowing details of crimes against the Uyghur and Turkic women in the death camps. So why would China go to war with women? This isn't about religion, it's about wielding power and ordering citizens to conform to the ideals set by Beijing. This freedom of thought, freedom of speech, female empowerment, the decision to choose, everything has been denied to the Uyghur people. So what drives a nation like China to behave in such a genocidal way? It's hate. You know, Maya Angelou, one of America's most beloved and celebrated poets and authors, said of hate, it has caused a lot of problems in the world, but has not solved one yet. But while we're all wondering about a solution, please consider this. Women in China's re-education camps for Uyghurs have been systematically raped, sexually abused and tortured. Many have been sterilized while others have been forced to undergo abortions. The details recounted by the sisters today are distressing, but our tears are no good unless we can back them up with direct action and peaceful resistance that will make regimes like China sit up and take notice. And I've been racking my brains thinking about this because brutal regimes like China hate peaceful resistance. It's very easy to shoot somebody who's firing back at you, but when you are presented with a lot of peaceful activists, it's not so easy. Obviously, we can't all go to China, but we can go to the Chinese embassies in our capital cities around the world, where we can campaign and protest. We can stand outside arms festivals and remind people going in, buying and selling exactly what China is doing to the Uyghur women. In Britain, we have state visits, and maybe we should campaign next time a Chinese leader is given the red carpet treatment by the royal family. We need to raise petitions, pressurize our members of parliament to treat Chinese officials with the contempt the state deserves. But the most powerful thing we can do is boycott and urge our countries to impose sanctions on trade. When the people start to lead in enough numbers, our leaders will act. So we must deluge our politicians with petitions, with emails. One of the first places that we can start is in our own backyard by educating our friends and neighbors and raise public awareness. The Chinese government has slowly eroded the religious and other freedoms of the Uyghurs. Now that has turned into an oppressive machine involving mass surveillance, detention, indoctrination, and even forced sterilization. The policy flows from Chinese President Xi Jinping, who after visiting Xinjiang in 2014, he instructed the military to show absolutely no mercy. China says reports of mass detention and forced sterilization are lies and absurd allegations. Well, we know who's lying. We know who the liars are, and the liars are the men in power in Beijing. As a journalist, I deal in facts, and here's some facts where women from the West can help our sisters in the East. Female survivors of the camps have spoken about how their heads were shaved when they arrived. You should know that China supplies more than 80% of the world's human hair products that are used by wig makers. This hair has come from concentration camps in East Turkestan, with one Chinese hair exporter saying, we have our own manufacturer, we just go to East Turkestan to source materials. Source materials means forcibly holding down an Uyghur sister and shaving her head by force. This is the reality. So at the same time as concentration camps went into operation, human hair production in China leapt by 78%. Hair sourced from these concentration camps is passed through forced labor facilities that we heard about earlier into nearby hair factories to be exported to wig makers around the world. And this is something for our sisters in America to think about. The United States is the largest importer of human hair from China. In 2018 alone, Americans spent $3.15 billion in hair products, which accounts for about 42% of China's total exports. I wonder how many American women would be happy to know that they're wearing the hair of a Uyghur, an Uyghur sister who has been gang raped, sodomized and sterilized. Suddenly, those hair extensions don't feel so good now, do they? Spread the word to influencers, beauty bloggers, and the rest of the media. Find out where wigs and hair extensions come from and stop buying products made in China. Now, I know that might seem trivial, but I'm trying to think what will trigger the media. You know, the media is fatigued about genocide, about mass rape, about torture. They're more interested in the shenanigans between the British royal family and Harry and Meghan Markle. So we've got to think outside the box and try and be creative. And it just occurred to me what we could do to stir the conscience of the international community, as Sister Shamsaden in South Africa alluded to. We could do something around this hair scandal. Maybe we should pick a day, and this is going to be controversial in itself with those sisters of the Muslim faith, like myself, but maybe we should pick a day in the year and shave off our hair on YouTube, on the social networks as a global protest, and then dump that hair outside the Chinese embassies. That would certainly focus people's attention. And you know, that I think it's in the Bible, it says if a woman has long hair, it's her glory. Well, let's show some solidarity with those sisters who have been shaved. Just, you know, this business of shaving the hair, it's exactly what the Nazis did to our Jewish sisters in the concentration camps. And, you know, apparently there is a Chinese saying that shiny hair is the most prized possession, symbolizing longevity, prosperity, wealth, and good fortune. maybe it's a malicious act, but at the end of the day, all that hair ends up being sold to the West to be worn by Western women. And I noticed in the message service there that somebody said that Uyghurs in China have no ability to speak up or can't defend themselves, and only the Uyghurs abroad are trying to raise awareness. Well, that's where we should all come in and show solidarity and strength in numbers. And, you know, I mentioned Maya Angelou earlier on. I'm going to finish with a man's poetry, just one line from a New York Instagram poet, Reuben Holmes, who said, "Give a woman pain and she'll turn it into power. Give that woman chaos and she'll create peace." And I just think that's something for us to take into International Women's Day tomorrow, and you know, think about how we can really make headlines and shine a spotlight on the activities of Beijing. You know, that's all I have to say at the moment, and I will try and stay on for any questions, but it is getting quite late here now. But thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. So that was so inspiring, and it's always great to have such endearing personalities such as yourself, and of course, a media journalist, and gives us quite an insightful perspective into the matter, especially from a human rights and a peace perspective. I just wanted to double check for one of our speakers, Marilyn Terkovich, whether she was available to jump on, and I think that she should be. Marilyn has a commitment that is nearing us, so I just wanted to perhaps introduce her next. She might talk for 4 to 5 minutes, and before she does, and I saw your message there, Marilyn, thank you so much for your time, and I do look forward to introducing you now and having you go on next. Of course, she is the executive director at the International Charter for Compassion. Her work has been in areas of global awareness, international education, race and social justice, as well as instructional design. It sounds really fascinating actually. She's worked internationally in Brazil, Croatia, Guatemala, India, Japan, with various community groups, and in the United States, of course, developing new program approaches in community involvement, action, and education. I do really appreciate your time, Marilyn, and please feel free to take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for accommodating my coming in front of someone else. You know, I really have very little to say because I think Yvonne has said so much, and so has Shamsaden. You know, I don't know how many people know about the Charter for Compassion. I'm listed as speaking in regards to Christian women. The Charter is really not a religious organization, though Karen Armstrong, who was the original founder, is really associated with the world's religions. Our work is really to look at compassion in the way of action. And through the years, we've only been around for 10 years, but I think we've created a wonderful network. And I think a part of what we have been talking about today is that any one of us who has access to a network really does need to mobilize. And part of what we've heard today is certainly an issue of human rights, of women's and girls' rights. It's a social justice issue of which we need to be concerned about. And I think Yvonne has spoken some really incredible ideas that I would love to put in front of all of the people around the world who are part of the Charter for Compassion. And, you know, Shamsaden reminded us of what the anthropologist Margaret Mead said about never underestimate what a small group of people can do. And I would say never underestimate what a small group of women can do, because I have to say that in the work that we do, the majority of that work is being done by women around the world. And so I am really hopeful that we can do something. And one of the things that we have done in the past is we've written guides, for example. We did one on the Islamophobia issue. We have worked with the Rohingyas in helping to do fiscal sponsorship for aiding people. And that's the kind of work that we do. But I'm reminded as I'm listening to all of this today, and I spent time yesterday reading and watching videos. It's amazing how much we don't know. And I'm going to almost make the assumption that there's a majority of people, even in China, who don't know what we're talking about. And so education is so incredibly important here. And the ideas that have been shared are extremely important, including the ones that were action statements that appeared earlier in the chat box. One of the things that I almost feel that I personally would like to do is to write a letter to the people of China. And I don't know what that would do, but if each of us would write letters and do the kinds of actions, the hair issue is really quite interesting. And I would like to propose that what we might be able to do collectively, I mean, there's a good number of people who have been on this webinar today, but it's such a small fraction of people. And the information that has been shared has been so incredible, but we need to think beyond this small number. We really need to think, how is it that each of our groups can reach out to similar groups? And though I started out by saying that we're really not so much a religious group. I mean, interfaith and religion is one of 12 sectors with whom we work. We also work with women and girls and social justice and people in business, etc. All of whom I really would love to get involved in this. But if we could invite people in a large education sit-in, kind of the thing that happened in the United States early in civil rights, where we had the Mississippi schools, where people were really taught about history. And so I would like to propose that we think about doing something like that, because it's really, I believe, one of the most powerful things that we have to give to one another. And I would, without taking on responsibility for all of the people who work with the Charter for Compassion, I would say that I would like to propose to them that this issue is one that we would really hold to our hearts in the next months and very possibly the next years. We have worked in the past with Sound Vision, and I'm very proud of that association, and most proud of when the anti-Muslim, or for Muslims to sign and register, came out of our last presidents. We joined hands so that we can work in communion with all people being Muslims. So that is my pledge, and I really hope to get to know each person on this call, and it was a real honor to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Really, the honor is all ours, Marilyn. I do wanted to thank you despite commitments here on everyone's end. And of course, that brings me to our next guest, who is also joining us from all the way in South Africa. Just keeping in mind that I'm in Canada and we have a few members from also other parts of the United States, as well as from the UK. So international team here at united under one shared mutual goal, which is to end the forced labor and genocide, as well as the gender-based and sexual and gender-based violence against Uyghur, Muslim, and Turkic ethnic women and girls in East Turkestan. Next, I'm so happy to introduce Kathy Kaler, who joined us with a really unique background here. Kathy's the radio host and CEO of 101.9 Chai FM, which is South Africa's first Jewish radio station. Sounds super fascinating. I'd love to give it a listen one day. Kathy's professional background is actually in marketing and public relations. She joins us today as a mentor, a business analyst, a thought leader, as well as a speaker. Kathy, without further ado, please feel free to go on.
Thank you so very much. I would just like to just say thank you so much for putting this together, and just to say salam to everybody on the group. Let me tell you that I am based in Johannesburg, so please forgive the blurry-eyedness. I don't usually look this tired, and it's coming up for almost 1:30 in the morning. This has been absolutely fascinating though, and I feel very much connected to each of you. So thank you very, very much to Hena for putting this together, for all of the organizers. So being a Jewish woman, we have our holy book, which is called the Torah. And what it says about women in the Torah is that when the men sinned, the woman didn't. It actually raises women up. So it's quite significant that you're doing this so close to International Women's Day, because it turns out that women actually, we know instinctively what the right thing is to do. There are examples, but I know that we're short of time, so I'm not going to go into those examples. What has spoken to me about the plight of the Uyghur is that for 70 years, my people, the Jewish people, have asked the question, why? Since the Holocaust, we have asked why. Why did it happen? Why did it happen to us? And why was the world silent? Anybody today who has read the BBC, Reuters, Deutsche Welle, any of these websites, Daily Mail, CNN will know about the Uyghur, and yet it seems that the world is silent. And that can be quite disheartening, because that means that we haven't learned from our past. And as we know, those who don't learn from their past are doomed to repeat it. It's very important that we continue having these conversations. We live in a strange time where the news cycle is very short. It's very unusual for a news story to be on the news cycle for longer than 24 hours. Today, people read headlines and think that they know the story. They don't even read the subtext anymore. So how do we make a change? We have to keep the conversation going. 18 months ago, I knew nothing about the Uyghur. My community, our listeners, 100,000 listeners in Johannesburg, knew nothing about the Uyghur. People listen to us, and 15,000 people a day listen to us in over 80 countries around the world. They may have known, but they didn't know from us. But subsequently, we've changed that, because it's an important conversation. As a Jewish person, when I saw those videos of these people being shaved, handcuffed, shackled, and put onto trains, my blood ran cold, because there are so many similarities between what is happening to the Uyghur and what happened during the Holocaust. And the Holocaust was the ultimate conclusion to racism, wasn't it? That's what happens. Let's not let it get there. You know, when we look at how, from the indoctrination to the dehumanization, you know, the attacking the language. People are not allowed to speak Uyghur. From attacking religion, forced labor, birth control, sexual violation, shaving the heads. It's all dehumanizing. Even ghettoization. I was watching a video this afternoon actually on these towns that they bring tourists to show how everything is okay, how everything is normal. Well, you know what? The Nazis did that too. They did that with the Red Cross when they brought the Red Cross in to the concentration camps. So what do we do about it? We have to keep the conversation going. We have to keep doing those interviews. I'm talking as a radio station, and I'm taking on personally to mobilize, global jury. Look, it's a big job because Jews don't agree with one another, right? There's 3 opinions between 2 people. But this is something that I think resonates with all of us. Opportunity knocked, but I had to build the door. Let's build that door. To all of my Uyghur friends and brothers and sisters especially, I want you to know that you aren't alone. There are people in your corner who have a voice, who will give you a voice, who will give you a platform, and who want to see the right thing done by you. Thank you for being so brave, for coming out, for speaking, for sharing this knowledge, because without knowledge, we can't action anything. So thank you all very, very much for sharing the information. Yvonne, your suggestion about the hair and China, I did have to laugh. I had a giggle at that because I just pictured it in my head. We actually tried something, I don't know if you know, but South Africa has a huge challenge with rhino poaching. Those rhinos are all destined for China. And there were campaigns here. Rhino horn is made out of keratin. And there was a campaign here where people would cut their fingernails and toenails and post them off to the local embassies, because fingernails and toenails are also made from the same keratin that rhino horn is. So I don't know how well that went down. We still haven't conquered our rhino poaching problem, although we are slowly getting on top of it, but it's taking, it's unfortunately taking armed forces to do it. But thank you so much, and it's a great idea, even for the novelty of it. So I am going to just wrap up. I just want to thank Hena for always being available to talk about the Uyghur. And thank you to all of you for putting this together, for being panelists, for sharing your information, for all the research, the facts that you have shared with all of us. And I just say shukran, salam, and just remember that you're not alone. Keep hopeful.
Thank you, Kathy, for your message of hope, and I'd like to share my shalom with you. I also want to share a really great quote by Kathy. I'm going to read it out. It's opportunity knocked, but I had to build the door. That's by Kathy Kaler, and I just feel like a saying like that resonates with so many of us, and it's quite encouraging to learn something like that, and it's also quite encouraging to learn about Jewish solidarity with Uyghurs, simply because the experience there is so similar, and it's definitely shared. So just without further ado, we have a couple more people here that I'd like to introduce. Next, Khadija Huseyin, followed by Nuzat Jeffrey, as well as Malak Shalabi. Very briefly, Khadija Huseyin is a communications director for the Muslim Women's Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering Muslim women and girls through focus areas of leadership development, fostering community service, mentoring women, and empowering the community through social justice awareness and action. Khadija will be speaking with us about the role of Muslim women in ending the Uyghur genocide. Please go ahead, Khadija, and thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you, Salaha. I begin in the name of God, most merciful, most kind. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you to all the organizers at Justice for All for putting this conference together. To all the esteemed speakers on this panel, your tireless activism is inspiring and gives hope that one day soon this genocide will end and our Uyghur sisters will be free. In the past year, life in a pandemic has changed the way everything operates, including community organizing and activism. However, Muslim women leaders did not stand still in the face of increasing violence and human rights abuse of the Uyghur people. In order to raise awareness about the crimes against humanity, force accountability from US companies operating in China, and demand world leaders take action, Muslim women leaders are diverse in their advocacy. Knowing that it would take a multifaceted approach, you have Muslim women leaders leading international boycotts, demanding retailers stop using goods made by forced labor. You also have Muslim women activists through social media platforms, leading advocacy training Zooms, Twitter storms, and letter writing campaigns to elected officials. In addition, you have Muslim women bringing the urgency of the plight of the Uighur through art, literature, and journalism. Last summer, news broke about the extensive list of major global retailers using products made by imprisoned Uyghurs. Muslim women amplified the call to boycott all goods being sourced from the Xinjiang province in China. Increased pressure on brands like Gap, Amazon, Nike, through demands from 118 human rights groups and countless social media users, resulted in journalists following the chain of supply of consumer goods directly to forced labor by detained Uyghur. This PR nightmare had a direct financial impact on China, with leading companies like IKEA and H&M stating they would no longer source from Xinjiang, and many more following suit. Earlier this year, following intense pressure from activists and organizations, the United States officially declared a ban on all cotton goods sourced from Uyghur concentration camps. In fact, going even further to state that the United States will not tolerate forced labor of any kind, and companies should eradicate Xinjiang products from their supply chains. Another creative angle in activism has younger generations of Muslim women using social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram to call attention to the plight of our Uyghur sisters and brothers. Using trending songs and hashtags, these teenage activists display signs or slip in facts about the oppression and violent torture being used in these so-called re-education camps. Not shying away from calling out the atrocities taking place, these viral videos reach millions of users, managing to bring awareness to an entire new generation of human rights activists. Muslim women are also turning to the arts in order to remind the world of the Uyghur plight. You have author Muyassar Abdul Ahad, known by her pen name Handan. After seeking refuge in Turkey, Handan founded Ayhan Education, an organization dedicated to teaching the Uyghur language to the diaspora. In her first novel, Farewell to the Sun, Handan wrote the first fiction book focusing on the detention camps in the Uyghur region. NPR reported last week on the power of arts and activism, as was seen recently at the Uyghur Awareness Art Show held by the Muslim Students Association at University of Connecticut. From visual and performance art by these student activists, the Yukon MSA raised money for Uyghur widows and orphans along with a petition campaign. Here's an excerpt from a poem called Through Their Eyes. All they wanted was to live in harmony with themselves. They have that right, they have that liberty, but it was lost in the abyss. So much power in their being. The dryness in their throat begs to be replenished. They are losing the battle. But through their eyes, we must search for them. We must fight for them. Yeah. We must live for them. We must reform for them. We must find them. Through their eyes, save them. While the goal of China is to erase the Uyghur identity, Muslim women activists will never allow that to happen. In the words of the great Maya Angelou, the truth is, no one of us can be free until everybody is free. And until that day comes, the advocacy, the activism of Muslim women ensures that the calls for justice for our Uyghur sisters will echo throughout the world until it is answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadija. That was beautiful. I did appreciate you going into the history there. I did want to really happily introduce our next speaker, which is actually a fellow Canadian, such as myself. and of course somebody with such a unique background and position and perspective, given her position in working with all kinds of women and girls in the community. And that is of course Miss Nuzat Jeffrey, who is the executive director of the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, which is a nonprofit organization here in the Toronto area. She has a lot of leadership experience in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. In the Ontario government, Nuzat has led legislation and policy development, human resources, and communications functions in various ministries and agencies, including the Ministries of Education, Community and Social Services, Culture and Citizenship and Immigration Programs. I'm quite excited to introduce her today to speak about the perspective of the future of Canadian solidarity with Uyghurs, as recently in Canadian Parliament as well as in the federal government, there have been a few positive developments, but of course nothing like what we've seen in the UK or the US. So I hope that I know that she's going to talk about that now. Thank you and welcome to the program, Nuzat.
Thank you, Saleha, and thank you, Justice for All, and all of the speakers. I was so, I don't know, I was overcome with emotion. The more I heard about the atrocities and the torture and just the ugliness of what's going on, I was losing hope. But then some of you came up with the actions that have been taken to actually make a difference, and hopefully, you know, we can join with you to make that happen, because we have actually Canadian Council of Muslim Women is a national women's organization. It's one of the oldest Muslim organizations in the country. We've been around for almost 40 years, and our commitment is to the equality, equity, and empowerment of Canadian Muslim women. So we focus on actions in Canada, you know, so we look at Canadian policy, Canadian legislation, and advocate on behalf of Canadian Muslim women to governments, to other service providers, and so on. But we join in solidarity with other Muslim women who are suffering. So we've done a lot of work with fellow Muslim women in advocating for change for women in other countries as well. In the case of the Uighur that we've been discussing all afternoon, the Canadian government did, well, it's not the government of Canada, but the House of Commons, or the Parliament of Canada, on February 22nd, voted in favor of a motion that labeled China's actions against Uyghur genocide. So at least there's an acknowledgement. But the sad thing was that only one cabinet minister, that is Foreign Minister Marc Garneau, was present for the vote, and he abstained. So unfortunately, political leadership from the government is wanton still. And in fact, even our prime minister and all other cabinet ministers were absent from this vote. So the government has to show leadership, but that cannot happen without action from other Canadians. And of course, we hope that we're going to be able to become more active on the file and ask the government to take action. So one of the things that struck me was what Canada did about the Rohingya crisis. They actually appointed a special envoy, the Honorable Bob Ray, to actually, a special envoy to Myanmar, to study the situation. And what struck me was that, you know, there were thousands and thousands of, hundreds of thousands of displaced persons. So there were atrocities against women and girls, and the Rohingya people right in Myanmar. But then there were all these displaced persons. And of course, women and children were suffering greatly, as they are in all of these situations, as we've heard over and over again about the suffering of the Uyghur women and children. So he went there, Bob Ray went there, and he studied the situation, and he came back with a very, very extensive report. And not only that, Canadian government committed to spending money, you know, in helping the Rohingya. And then, of course, because there were displaced persons, the issues of refugees was very acute as well. Well, in the case of China, no one can get out of that place. So we don't have the issue of you know, thousands of displaced persons or refugees. Um, and I find that very interesting because the action, I think, sometimes is prompted by what Western governments have to do to deal with, you know, a refugee crisis. So the motivation is very different. And it's very interesting, you know, someone already said this, but the world has been silent for the most part when it comes to persecution of the Uyghurs. And it wasn't that active either on the plight of the Rohingya. And the commonality there is they're majority Muslims. And you know, the atrocities are being perpetrated by either, you know, the Burmese in the case of Myanmar, or the Chinese, the Han, you know, Chinese Communist Party. But the West is not interested in resolving that issue. You know, they have been silent. So it's up to civil society like ours to take on governments to act. I know we're running out of time, but I thought that in the Canadian motion, there were a few interesting ideas. So one was to urge the International Olympic Committee to move the 2022 Olympics from Beijing. You all talked about, you know, boycotts and divestments. Well, that boycott is a pretty important one. And then I know that at a government level, sanctions, you know, work because they hurt the pocketbook, they hurt the economy. Because of the unfortunate situation with China and the Canadian government, they're reluctant to take action. But I think exposing all of these atrocities over and over again, just all of the strategies that you've talked about, we can, you know, we can bring about some action. So what we're committing to doing, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women is committing to doing, is standing in solidarity with all of you to bring about change at the government level. And also, we have a project underway currently, so we're interested in hearing from Uyghur women directly. We're looking at their health and their labor force participation, any other social issues that they're encountering. So if you happen to live in Canada, or even if you don't, but you have relatives or friends who live in Canada, I'm going to give you an email address, and maybe we can just put it in the we can put it in the chat box. info@ccmw.com. info@ccmw.com. We would really like to hear from you, and we will join you. We will join you in your fight. I know my time's probably up, and you're all doing amazing work, and we want to be there with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuzad Jeffrey from the national organization Canadian Council of Muslim Women. Quite an honor to have you, and just to echo the sentiments of our director as well from Justice for All, who also said thank you for your leadership. And I wanted to take a moment for everybody, and we've had almost 100 people on the program, which is amazing. If you know anybody with this Uyghur lived experience, or if you are an Uyghur Turkic woman yourself with this lived experience, please do send a message to the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. I know that, you know, they're amazingly across all social media platforms. And of course, the email is here in the chat box. But if you're not using Zoom to join us today, it is simply info@ccmw.com, or anywhere on social media or their website. That's the Canadian Council of Muslim Women. I really wanted to thank everyone for their time today. Lastly, but certainly not least, I would love to hear from our next speaker. I know she's ready to go. This would be Malak Shalabi, and she is a law student, which is really cool, at the University of Washington School of Law. She's written on torture, occupation, and U.S. imperialism in the Middle East, and she serves as a media coordinator with the American Muslims for Palestine. So today she will be speaking about solidarity from Al-Aqsa to Idka. Please go ahead, Malak.
Thank you so much for your introduction. I want to thank everybody for sticking around this long. This has been so insightful, so educational. I will carry so much of this knowledge and these stories with me in my work. And I really just extend the deepest form of solidarity and gratitude as a Palestinian on behalf of my community, on behalf of my nation. Thank you so much, and I will keep this brief because I'm really thankful that we got to center the stories of survivors of camps, horrific things that they have endured, and the stories of forced sterilization, the stories of enslavement, the stories of trying to remove and strip every form of Islam from the Uyghur population in East Turkestan really speaks to every single Muslim. It hits a chord really deep in our hearts because we can relate to the practice of prayer. We can relate to the idea of attending a mosque, and even imagining those spaces being destroyed, those practices being prohibited is absolutely horrific. And so the question becomes why? Why is this happening? Why are Uyghurs being targeted in East Turkestan? Why are Palestinians being targeted for their religious identity in Palestine as well? In Palestine, although there are not the internment camps as we see, there is no comparison to the situation in East Turkestan. And what we do see, though, in a similarity is that the regimes use the stripping of religion as a tool to demoralize the society. So during the bombing attacks on Gaza, they specifically target mosques to destroy those religious spaces. We also see the ban on the adhan in public spaces. We also see restrictions on who's able to go to prayer. And that's because they're worried and they're about youth mobilizing and younger people being able to rise up against oppression and occupation in Palestine. But the question once again is why? Why are Muslims being targeted for their religious identity in these situations? And the answer to that is because they see Islam as a threat to the status quo, a threat to the understanding that a specific regime, a specific government has complete power and control over people, because Islam serves as a way to liberate us from these oppressors, and every Muslim in that way serves as a vessel of faith. They serve as a vessel of humanity. They serve as a vessel of freedom in refusing to follow or obey rulings or intimidation that will push them away from that. So please know that the Uyghur Muslims and the families of the Uyghur Muslims are in our prayers. Palestinians, even back home, especially back home, have repeatedly protested and wrote on this specific issue because it is so harrowing. And to every Muslim who is being oppressed on the basis of their faith, they will one day see the light, they will one day see freedom. And we are all here working hand in hand to ensure that that happens. And just to close out, I think it's really important, especially now as we're brainstorming and sharing ideas, that I for sure have also taken down to share with my organization as to how we can work in collaboration and solidarity. I think it's really important to fund the work that's already happening. Justice for All, this is what I know, the organization I'm most familiar with has done incredible advocacy work here in the United States, and the other organizations that we learned about today as well are doing incredible work. So please be sure to support them. Please be sure to allow this work to continue, because they are in the halls of Congress, they are working with media, and they are making sure that the cause of the Uyghur Muslims is heard in every corner of this earth. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for organizing this session.
Thank you, Melik. And I just wanted to thank everyone, all of our attendees, especially our esteemed panelists today for contributing your incredible expertise on genocide and gender in the 20th century concerning Uyghur women, and to bring together your incredible collection of some of the finest thoughts, studies, research, and experiences from your respective backgrounds and fields. Today, as everyone knows, just to recap, we examined Uyghur gender discourses in their genocide and in the crimes against humanity that they are currently experiencing, as well as their 21st century atrocity crimes being committed by the Chinese Communist Party in the government in China today. We looked over, or we examined rather, with the help of our leadership team, the practices going on right now, as well as the experiences that come out of ethnic cleansing and genocide in the 21st century. I wanted to thank everybody. If you're joining us through Zoom, please take a look at our chat section as we've tried to share all certain kinds of calls to action as to how you can make a difference. You can also just visit our campaign website dedicated to fighting this, this horrible atrocity. That's simply www.saveuyghur.org. Save Uyghur, that's Save Uyghur, UIGHUR.org. On our campaign website, you will find all different kinds of ways to assist, whether that's contributing to one of our campaigns, launching an action alert, or even just volunteering with us behind the scenes. And a couple of our speakers today were actually interns or team members from our respective campaigns. So thank you again so much. I do want to thank everyone, despite going a little bit over time, unfortunately. Thank you so much for our esteemed panel of guests. I do hope to engage everybody in the near future. If we didn't get a chance to answer any of your questions, what we are doing is compiling all questions and reserving them for a town hall, likely next week or so, on Uyghur women's experiences. So do look out for your question being answered anytime soon. If you log onto our website, justiceforall.org, and subscribe to our newsletter, you will also be informed on such initiatives such as our town hall being held next week or so. Thank you so much. Greetings of peace, and I do wish everybody a wonderful rest of your weekend. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Shukran jazeelan.
Assalamu alaikum and jazakallah khair for all of you for being here. And inshallah, we hope God blesses all our work that everyone is doing. Thank you all for being here.